Well, let me ask you this. The report described President Biden as a, quote, elderly man with a poor memory. Do you think the White House should allow the release of the full transcript without claiming executive privilege for the sake of transparency, Senator?
You know, that is going to be, again, up to the president and his lawyers. But I've got to comment on this just from my own personal experience. I was on Air Force One with the president going from Minnesota to Wisconsin going from Washington, D.C. to Wisconsin for an infrastructure project. And I was with the president for over an hour and talked about so many things, domestic, international. He was focused. His recall was good. It was the same experience that my colleagues had who met with him for hours, Democrats and Republicans, about the Mideast only a few weeks ago. And so I think that we've got to evaluate what's happening right now by, one, what he has done, which is bring us out of this pandemic. First time that we're finally seeing negotiation of prescription drug prices and focused on what matters to the American people, and compare what he is doing to what we've got as the alternative on the Republican side, which is Donald Trump, who is nothing but standing up week by week for chaos.
Well, Senator, you take me to my next point, which is on 2024. As you know, concerns have been growing for quite some time within your party about President Biden's ability to win a second term. The latest person to express this, Ezra Klein of the New York Times, who said this week, quote, he is not up for this. He is not the campaigner he was even 5 years ago. The way he moves, the energy in his voice, the Democrats denying decline are only fooling themselves. Senator, what is your reaction to that stark assessment?
My reaction is, as someone who ran against Joe Biden, as someone who has spent significant amount of time with Joe Biden, that he is up for this job. And again, I just keep looking at the facts. Our country, the GDP, our unemployment rate, the fact that we're now at the place where we can tackle the challenges before us, which is things like housing and childcare. And then you got to look at the alternative here as well. Joe Biden has been standing up for women's health care.
Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement. Help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is episode 200. Episode 200. Congratulations to everybody out there in the audience who continues to support the podcast, which in turn continues to support our growth and our ability to reach this milestone of 200 episodes. You know, hey, we're growing a really big audience all across the world, all across the country. I can't tell you how many people I saw this weekend at the Big Three and people that I continue to see here in the state of Minnesota who say that they're watching the podcast and they really enjoy the podcast. And it has a much broader reach than certain statistics, which I'm sure are curated by certain institutions, certain political worldviews. Certain statistics would reflect. So that's good. And we appreciate your continued support here on YouTube. If you're in the chat, remember to hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, a real comment. I think it helps the algorithm, but who knows? Maybe I'm just shadow banned all the way across the board. Hard to say. But you know, we're making an impact. We're making an impact here. We're consistently, slowly but surely building. We just recently crossed 20,000 subscribers. We love to get that number way up there, but we understand that the kind of conversations we have, like the one we're going to have tonight, aren't rewarded by the algorithm. They aren't rewarded by the globalist and neoliberal, neocon milieu of online content. And we're fine with that. You know, it taking your time is a lost art. Patience is a lost art. And I just tend to be very patient when it comes to certain things. Some things I'm very impatient, but some things I'm very patient with. And I think building a dialogue, a national discourse, a political discourse, a global discourse that is elevated, that is meaningful, that is rooted in genuineness and authenticity is invaluable. You can't even put a number on it. So why care what the numbers are, right? We know that a lot of content from this podcast makes it to the internet in clip form and goes viral often. Some through my own social media and us pushing it out that way, but some also through third party um, people. And we like that. If you want to rip the content, please. In fact, we would recommend. We want you to rip content from the podcast and use it on your own social media and repost it. We have no problem with that whatsoever. It helps the channel grow. It helps people be aware of the podcast, and ultimately, that's what we want to do. So I want to say thank you to the great Carrie Lake. She endorsed me this week for United States Senate, and I'm very honored. Carrie Lake is a fighter in a way that, again, can't really be put into words. It can't be quantified. It's unquantifiable. Hearing Carrie Lake reject that offer to basically get a handsome payoff to sit this election cycle out because of how strong a candidate she really is, not only in her individual Senate race there in the state of Arizona, but as a voice on the national stage to help support the America First movement and ultimately Donald Trump retaking the White House here in November. That was one of the most honorable moments in recent American history. And I'm proud to know her. I'm proud to call her my friend. I'm proud to be in this race for United States Senate when we have an opportunity to put a good number of them, several America Firsters in the United States Senate. And what an incredible feat that would be. Trent Staggs out there in Utah, Carrie Lake, and we got some others across the country as well. And make no mistake about it, 100 United States senators run this country. They don't run it alone. The administrative state, the intelligence community, we know there are a bunch of governing bodies, institutions that are out of control, tyrannical, and have a fair amount of influence over American life. But from a technical standpoint, the Senate is a body that can be understated. And I think currently it is pretty much understated because it has been or has become such a rubber stamp for the very agenda that undermines this country. So again, I thank Carrie Lake for her endorsement. I look forward to her winning her race out there in Arizona. I don't know if my endorsement means much because Carrie Lake is a superstar of the movement, and I'm just this radical, militant, crazy man out in northern country of Minnesota, trying to make a difference. But if it would, I would gladly endorse Carrie Lake for her race as well. So thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it. My campaign appreciates it. The people here in Minnesota, we support you and we support your fight. She is exactly what the permanent political class and legacy media in this country fear. She is exactly what they're afraid of. She is exactly what they hope to stifle. And they're going to have a problem doing it because Carrie's a fighter. She's as good a fighter as we have. So I'm happy again, and thank you, Carrie Lake, and thank you to your team and her campaign. And we wish you nothing but the best. However, today is not going to be all attaboys and pats on the back. We're going to get into some colorful stuff tonight. I had some time. I was on the road a little bit, and I had some time to really think about this this political zeitgeist that we're living through. And it occurred to me when I see this staunch defense of the LGBTQ trans agenda, especially as it pertains to children, which, again, I said before and I will continue to say, should be a very definitive line, should be a distinct line that we draw in the sand as America Firsters and MAGA. And I don't like the WWE politics. I don't like the cultural wedge issues. And I said on Tom Hauser last week, I think it was, or the week before, LGBTQ citizens deserve rights. I mean, obviously, their rights are constitutionally protected. Does that mean that our kids should be subject to a sort of political worldview that has almost become religious? Or now it is religious. It's everything but rooted in any type of supernatural faith. It has all the other tenets of being religious. So should our children be exposed to that at public schools where we fund through our tax dollars? Absolutely not. But the LGBTQ has rights. Everyone deserves to have rights, constitutional rights. That's guaranteed. These things are foundational ideas, ideas that we run the risk of losing in a hurry. It's a sort of slippery slope when the left and the Marxists and the communists and the globalists and all these other factions of people who don't really see American identity as being central to American way of life. You run the risk of losing those guaranteed rights, really quick, and then not too long after, maybe you're the one that this oversized tyrannical government comes after next, and who will be there to stop them? I mean, I know you believe because your views are aligned, you'll always be safe. But that's never how tyranny works. People who think that either have a very short history and understanding of how tyranny unfolds, or they don't really care. And they're so self-loathing and so self-hating that if tyranny befalls them, they actually kind of like it. And that's what I want to talk about today. This is, an unplanned segue right into the conversation I want to have. I was riding, I was thinking of how this sort of dogmatic, staunch defense of trans stripper drag shows in front of the kids has become commonly accepted, or not commonly accepted, but widely accepted within the political milieu of mainstream media and the liberal and Democrat, liberal movement and Democrat Party. I just got to thinking, and I'm just a regular guy. I'm self educated. I went to university. I had the privilege of being, let's say, raised by individuals who um, you could call above average. Intellectually. Let's say they had an above average curiosity in broader political and world issues. Okay. I don't like to talk about net IQ and things like that because there are I believe there are uh, types of intelligence that are also hard to quantify, very hard to quantify. In fact, I know that from being an athlete, not as a tangent, but from being an athlete, there are things that athletes do that have the marker of genius, but they're hard to quantify. I mean, you can quantify it by wins and losses, but even that starts to get difficult. Like spatial genius, understanding angles and space and patterns and things like that. You would think a lot of athletes, because they have such a great spatial awareness and sort of creativity and pattern recognition, that they test through the charts, IQ tests. I don't know particularly how the subset of athletes test an IQ test, but you would think it would probably be above average. It wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't above average, and that's something to investigate. But I digress. My point is, I grew up in a way where I was always taught to challenge things if they didn't make sense, to ask questions. And part of being raised to ask questions is the first order of questioning comes within, and that's a healthy practice. That is what you would call a healthy epistemological practice. The first questions I'm going to ask are within. I'm going to set a framework of what it is I'm trying to uncover, what it is I'm trying to learn, what it is I'm trying to gain the knowledge of, the perspective of. What is it that I want to know? First, I have to ask a question, but that question first is going to come from within. And so I've always been a person that questions things. And I wouldn't call myself a skeptic. I'm skeptical. I'm very skeptical of a lot of things in our modern society, but I'm not particularly staunch skeptic, like I'm not a contrarian. I don't just, you know, ask questions for the sake of. I think there are very pertinent questions we should be asking today. One of them is, how on earth did it become so accepted? Some of the you know, say tenets of our modern political culture here in this country. And I was on the road and I started to ask myself, I said, who, what are these groups of people? Who are these people? I'm from the neighborhood, so I always kind of go back to a more, uh, for lack of better data, a more anecdotal reference to demographic. So I think about school growing up. I think about school, grade school growing up, and then you had junior high and high school, and I think about the demographics of people. And if you ever have, you've all been in school, but if you've ever really paid attention in school, you'll notice that despite the best efforts of the schools, which I do think they try and do a fair bit of they put in a fair bit of energy to try and sort of homogenize the demographics of people at any given school, but to their best efforts still see people sort of group together. And this is in grade school, this is in pre-K, this is in junior high, this is in high school, college, wherever. Human beings have the proclivity to organize themselves into groups and into hierarchies. Seems pretty natural. I mean, it's not only is it natural across the animal kingdom, but the vast majority of evidence in the history of human civilization shows us that human beings do it too, pretty naturally. Now, some people would argue that that's socially constructed. I would argue that it's more natural, that it's more natural and organic. And so, in reference to our conversation today, is I started to think about who were the groups of people that have now become the sort of LGBTQ trans movement, and I add in the Antifa movement because um, many people in the Antifa movement self-identify as being on the non-binary spectrum. And that's not conjecture. That's not my opinion. That's from living here in Minnesota and also being out there in the streets when the George Floyd protests were taking place and running into a lot of people who identified as Antifa or had that sort of vibe going. And it's funny to me the way I see it, and I could be completely wrong. I could have my math all messed up. I could be way off here. But it would seem to me that the goth kids and the emo kids became the LGBTQ activists slash, members, and then now are involved in that sort of Antifa line of politics, line of thinking. Tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, I actually know some personally, so it's not 100% conjecture or opinion. It's somewhat anecdotal, but I have experienced that walk in my own personal life. I've seen it. I've seen those kids that were sort of emo goth in school become the LGBTQ, the radical LGBTQ activists, and then the sort of radical revolutionary Antifa, left leaning political activists. And it just dawned on me the other day. I was riding around. I was talking to one of my boys on the phone, and we got to reminiscing about the whole 2020 George Floyd situation and what kind of took place there. And I want to start you off with a story because there's a lot that I have yet to say about many things now well covered in the media, but not well detailed. And I always look at that as a good thing, as a great opportunity. Even when I was fighting with the NBA and all of these mainstream media outlets, jumped the gun, wrote the headlines that they wanted to write, talked to some person who works for the Houston Rockets without ever calling me for a comment. All of those, um, all of those things ended up being beneficial in the end. Now you'll have your average fan or troll on Twitter or whoever it is out there who only reads headlines and they only get a very shallow, low resolution uh, bit of information from anything that they're really looking at anywhere in their life, and they'll say stupid stuff that they really have no evidence or basis for. But I mean so too is life. I mean, so what? The point is that the human spirit, the human intuition longs for the truth. It longs for wisdom, knowledge, and wisdom. The human spirit, the human intuition longs for the truth, knowledge, and wisdom. So every time they tell a story about me or they write a headline that's a complete lie, there's a bit of energy that's sent out around the collective human consciousness. Let's call it. People are curious, and that's why the entire time that the mainstream media covered for the NBA to paint me in one light, always came back and had to sort of concede that, this guy is so interesting. I'm really not that interesting. What makes me interesting, what makes me kind of mysterious and appealing is that there's so much misinformation about me. When you actually sit down to hear me talk, you go, that doesn't match what I was told. People tell me that when they meet me in person all the time. Just the stuff they write about you doesn't match, what my experience is. And that's because the mainstream media, the legacy media, the permanent political class, your global elites that are experts in propaganda have no problem lying to you, especially when it comes to young people, especially young people who have any interest whatsoever in fighting against the status quo. They especially have no problem lying to you about people like me. In fact, I think they get off on it. They get off on seeing how long they can uphold misinformation and a lie about young people who actually see through the bullshit and are willing to challenge the status quo. Well, that goes both ways. That interest, that gratification goes in both directions because I like it too. I like withstanding the barrage and waves of insults from the trolls. I can just feel, I can feel that visceral impulse for them to lash out in hopes that they could, I don't know, discourage me from changing the status quo that they've come to find so convenient. I actually revel in that. That actually gets me up in the morning. I get off on that. So, it's working in both directions, and that's why the movement, as we call it, is a moving. Because people like me aren't discouraged. People like Donald Trump aren't discouraged because somebody calls them crazy or a criminal or says that they're a conspiracy theorist or anything. That is so run of the mill. It's almost a badge of honor, especially when we look at who's doing who's hurling the insults. Just look at them. And it's like they don't even see themselves. Me, I find myself to be pretty middle of the row. And I don't mean middle of the row as in moderate or UniParty. I mean pretty reasonable and willing to look at both sides of an issue. Like I said on X, over the weekend, as soon as we start to realize that the greatest purveyor of the status quo in this country is the narrative about black and white, and that the money that undergirds the money that benefits and profits from that narrative, which stagnates the people and keeps us from ever joining hands to really challenge the status quo of how the money works, then we can actually start to demand well-being. And what I was saying there is about George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, right? Is we've come to know the image of Derek Chauvin and George Floyd as the epitome of the racial divide here in this country. But every time I see the image of Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, all I see is a society that has failed culturally, a society that failed both of them, a society that continues to fail all of you, a society that has intentionally created the circumstance for chaos just like that to unfold every day. And that type of chaos does unfold every day. It's not every day you get to see it the way we saw it in 2020. But those things happen on a daily basis. Also, a cop gets ambushed, shot, and killed violently here in Minneapolis by another black individual. I say black in quotations because Somalians wouldn't really consider themselves to be black unless it's Ilhan Omar and it's politically expedient. As soon as she leaves the stage and is no longer in front of a camera or microphone, she probably doesn't really consider herself to be black. And when I say black, I mean American black. I don't want to get down in the weeds in the identity politics, but we do live in a hyper political identity culture. So the way people describe themselves and the way people present themselves and the way people sort of try to organize themselves or organize the dialogue around their identity, we have to confront and deal with, or else we can't really talk, right? So, again, when Jamal gets shot and killed here in Minneapolis by a Somali man, we're seeing the same failure we saw between Derek Chauvin and George Floyd. It's the same failure. It's the same cultural failure. There's a difference that it's varied. It's multivariate. It's not the exact same, but more or less it's the same. And see, people like me want to discuss those issues at that deep level, at that root level, because on the surface it's all emotion. In the moment, it's all emotion. And that moment can be tragic, and it can result in a loss of life. And it can forever change the lives of the individuals who were involved or who were nearby. But that still doesn't necessarily address the fundamental issues. And this is why I led people to the Federal Reserve after George Floyd died. This is the exact reason. Because the way the money works is the reason. It is the greatest indictment. It is the source code of the outcome that day. The same way it's the source code and outcome of a Jamal, of a Jamal. Black man, black officer shot and killed. No Black Lives Matter shows up. That tells you everything you need to know. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know about everything. It tells you everything you need to know about Black Lives Matter, which is why I've never been associated with them, which is why the mainstream media is trying to do their best to paint me having been associated with them to disenfranchise me to conservatives and Republicans, because they believe, again, like I said last week, they believe you're stupid enough to accept that I'm a BLM protester because I was in the belly of the beast organizing protest. But that's not true. In fact, it's not even logical. It's not even reasonable. But if they can get you emotional enough, then you'll probably believe it. And the scary thing is there's a trajectory of having such influence and control over the narrative by the mainstream media. They're not just running on your emotion for that day. They're running on the long haul emotional trajectory of the American mind across generations. There are narratives that are baked in. There are narratives that are just accepted, narratives we can't let go, that stop us from being able to see the truth and act on it. When George Floyd died, I saw the truth. It was an epiphany, right as I was watching. And then as I saw what took place in Minneapolis shortly thereafter, something didn't add up. And I said, I know exactly what time it is. It's time to talk about the money. It's time to talk about how the money works. We're going to the Fed. And we can talk about police reform. And we can talk about black on black crime. We can talk about the crisis of drug use and drug addiction in this country. That's all good. A drug addiction that's on both sides of the thin blue line, might I add, right? I mean, it's not just, minorities and black people in drug-infested communities that are dealing with substance abuse. I think police have the number one alcoholism rate of any profession in the country. So we see a pendulum there when it comes to drug abuse, and for plenty of logical reason. But follow the money. Follow the money. And I don't say it laughing to be light. I say it in a sense of humor often comes over me because it seems so clear. The only explanation as to why the people haven't risen up and thrown off this permanent political class and all of their corrupt elite oligarchs is because we are allowing our emotion and our desire or our willingness to engage in division to distract us and to lead us. And we're being led right over a cliff into an abyss of chaos where there are no answers. There's not even a language we can agree on to actually have a dialogue, let alone find answers. There's no desire for answers in much of this political zeitgeist. There's not even a real genuine desire for answers. It would almost seem as though people much more desire the constant bickering and arguing and sort of this sort of staged theatrical social media arena where I look like I'm the opponent of a given political worldview. And to what end? So other people can see you opposing a worldview. It's like, again, back to my original storyline. I went out and I said, let's bring people to the money, follow the money, the way the money works, the corporatocracy, same as I had been mentioning when I fought the NBA. The corporatocracy has made a decision about the value of a life. The corporatocracy has engaged in a business model that was that they were grandfathered into. Drugs, piracy, slavery, which can only yield a death in debt culture. The current corporatocracy and our global elite oligarchs were grandfathered in to a business model that can only lead to death in debt. We have a death in debt culture. We have a death in debt economy, world economy. We have a death in debt mentality. And so, of course, when you have a death in debt mentality, you're going to have tragedy. You're going to have frequent tragedy, whether it's a cop being ambushed, shot, and killed, whether it's George Floyd dying out on the street, and much, much more. Because the tenet, the axiom, the linchpin, the foundation of the culture is death in debt. We always must have debt, and we always must have death. And so I take you back to a story here. When the George Floyd situation occurred, and I led these demonstrations to the Federal Reserve, around downtown Minneapolis. But I'm pointing out the same thing. Minneapolis is touted for being this Fortune 500 company. All it's saying is that they're a bunch of globalists. That's what it's saying. I mean, that's not anything to brag about. That's not a flex, especially the way that our society is right now. I'm not saying that it couldn't be a flex for Minneapolis to have a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, but when those Fortune 500 companies, many of them serve a globalist agenda, which we're going to talk about what that really means here in a moment. But that's not anything to brag about. But yet everybody's sort of drawn to brag about it. One, because it's said to give all these opportunities to young, young millennial, 21 to 35-year-old professionals. It's always good to be in a city that's vibrant with a lot of corporate opportunity, right? I mean, opportunity even starts to drive the conversation to a point where you neglect the values, you neglect the principle. And in principle, many people on the left, this is what makes it so strange. It actually starts to undermine the Marxist philosophy at a fundamental level. Because the Marxist philosophy on the surface tries to present itself as this remedy to the unequal distribution of resources. That's straight out of the Communist Manifesto. I'm not making that up. Anybody can go buy it and read it. The Communist Manifesto, laid out by Karl Marx, is a pitch that Marxism and communism is a way to level the unequal distribution of resources and wealth in a society, which is always going to be unequally distributed. Is going to naturally be unequally distributed. But when you really look at the neo-Marxists, the modern Marxists or the communists, they're 100% in support of big corporations. I mean, 1,000%, 1,000,000%. The neo-Marxists love the establishment. The neo-Marxists are not anti-establishment. They're pro-establishment. They're pro-corporation. Now, it's about what that corporation's politics are, but they're pro-corporation. And their excuse, I don't know what their excuse is. There's, it's so logically incoherent. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. Um, but I think their argument is something like, we don't have a problem with the corporation. We just want to tax the corporation to no end to sort of facilitate the redistribution of wealth and resources. I mean, okay, but at the same time, you're going to tell us black folks who have no real shot in being pioneers or let's say industry leaders in things such as artificial intelligence or ecto farming and the reproduction of babies, human babies, real human babies, or I don't know, some type of android hybrid or just purely robots. We don't have a real leg up in the production of human beings, of workers. You're going to tell us that we're now useless and that the only thing to do for useless people, this is Noah Yuval Harari. I reference this soundbite all the time because it's just such a clear description of what they plan the future to be like for you. If we don't have the ability to mass produce human beings, what they really mean is workers. If we don't have that ability, we become useless. And as useless people, the only humane thing to solve our boredom is some combination of drugs and video games. That's strange. That's odd. It doesn't, the Marxist philosophy doesn't even add up right now. It's become so, warped and it starts to reveal itself as being truly anti-human and anti-God. It can talk about the redistribution of wealth and resources all it wants, but when it really comes down to it, their answer becomes, you as a human being have less value in the overall picture of what humanity is, mostly through some technological advancement, which really, when you think about technological advancement, all it is reducing the human existence down to price and energy. And there's nothing more Matrix than that. That's why Morpheus in the movie The Matrix, one of the most profound scenes in that movie is when Neo first discovers that, one, there is a Matrix, two, that there's a farm, an ecto farm, by the way, which strange that correlation is just 1-to-1. There was an ecto farm in the movie The Matrix, fields and fields of 100-story towers where human beings were being produced, mass produced for the energy. And Morpheus made the point that, this is what the whole thing is about. And he held up a little Duracell battery. Maybe it was an Energizer battery. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the movie in a while. But he held up a battery in front of Neo and said, this is the point. Well, by that time, in the Matrix storyline of things, the machines had taken over and the machines relied on energy. So the machines prioritized the energy as to where humans became sort of obsolete, which is what they're promoting. What's scary about it is we as human beings are actually the ones ushering it in right now. And I don't say that to fearmonger you. That is just what the conversation is. And I say all that to go back to my point. When I led the protests at the Fed, there was a moment where we were trying to collaborate with other local activist groups because I'm not really scared to come into contact with any of these activist groups. We had our own group, independent, wasn't funded by, wasn't, started by any of these other local activist groups. And we took a lot of heat for that because part of coming onto the activist scene is to get amalgamated with these other groups and therefore take on their ideology and perspective, which is kind of a rite of passage. Okay, you can grift and get whatever money you can from this sort of activist industry, as long as you have the same views that we do. Well, obviously, you guys know me. I wasn't willing to do that because that's just not how I am. And so we took some flack for that. But we were able to sort of diagnose and see a lot from sort of being in the mix. And while we were in the mix, there was an instance where a young woman named Jackie, who's an incredible singer. I mean, she is incredible. In fact, I think I'm going to put her, one of her songs uh, at the end of this podcast. Incredible voice. I mean, she has a voice that she hasn't even really found yet. She's going to end up being an incredible artist at some point, given all things work out well, right? Being a successful singer isn't just a matter of being a great singer or having a great voice. A lot of other things have to fall into place. Mostly, and what scares me for a lot of these young artists and musicians who I just love and think the world of, because it's one of those really unique God-given talents. A lot of them end up having to sell some of their integrity to reach the sort of height that they want to in their career, because the entertainment business is so monopolized. Same political elite and oligarchy, unironically. But anyway, so we were organizing these events, and everybody's jockeying for position because we were the new kid on the block, the 10K Foundation, new kid on the block, and we had this great branding that I myself was pretty much the sole creator of. The name 10K, the branding, the look, the content. Not maybe all the words that were said, in the captions. I wasn't always responsible for everything that was said because, we got interns and other people like that worked on social media posts. But the visuals all came through me. I'm a very visual person. I'm very good at visual creativity. And it was one of the reasons that the 10K Foundation, when it first popped on the scene after George Floyd died, had such huge turnout, because we were very strategic in terms of our branding. It's not hard. I mean, you create mystique and a sort of air of mystery, and people want to know more. They want to. Okay, so we were independent though. Independent, and some people didn't like that. Obviously, the other activist groups in the city, you felt you're stepping on their toes. We didn't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I don't know you people. I don't know you anything. That's what being an American, that's what being a rugged individualist is all about. I don't know you people. I don't know you shit. All I owe you is not to harm you. It's the basic rules and laws of nature. Not the laws of money. The laws of money are, if you even look like if you even enter into the realm of being a potential threat to the money, then you have to be eliminated. You have to be terminated. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. Anyway, so we organized an event one time, and obviously there were a bunch of LGBTQ activist groups sprinkled across all these other local activist groups. And I remember one day we were planning to do our own, event, and all these other groups had asked, could they help or participate? And we're like, great. We want all of the feminists. We want all of the BLM. We want all of the LGBTQ. We want all of the Antifa member. We want them all at the Fed. Perfect. I love that. Great. Why not? We want to bring the truth and tell the truth wherever we can, in front of as many people as we can, because you never know who you're going to convert, whose mind you're going to change. We want that. We invite that. We should encourage that. Not run off at the very mention of these groups. I mean, they've created such boogeymen out of them. It's like, you think most people don't know a lot about any one thing, let alone a bunch of things. So you think any of these people actually have a good grasp and understanding of the political worldview they've been brainwashed in? Of course they don't. A lot of people who wear Black Lives Matter t-shirts, they don't even know what the politics are really about. They don't understand that the Democrat Party wants to swell the federal government and make black people a permanent ward of the state. They don't get that. Most people, your average person, they don't get that. Your average person in America can't read at a 5th grade level, per the statistics. Think people really understand? No, they don't. They don't really understand all the details. So we want to expose the truth to as many of them as possible. I'm not afraid. Well, What do I need to be afraid of a bunch of Antifa activists for? Give me a break. It's ridiculous. We'll talk about that in a moment. But when we tried to do this event, there was a call that happened that I was a part of where the entertainment was being selected. Okay, who was going to speak, who was going to perform, who was going to pray, and you have this sort of hodgepodge of everybody come from their little corner of things that want to participate. Some people from the church community in the inner cities. You got pastors. You got officers. You got prominent business leaders. You got athletes. You got so everybody's kind of circling for a position to have their moment to promote whatever they're promoting, and a lot of them are promoting good things. Like there was a good program that my boy Rob Stye, who's older than me and went to De La Salle High School, was doing a food program where all of these protests that were taking place, he was going out getting food donated, and he was cooking up food, and he was feeding people that were out there protesting. Great, cool. I mean, that's how can you fault a man for feeding the people? You can never fault a man for feeding people. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just it doesn't make sense. Now, you can fault a government that feeds people crumbs to ensure that they never have enough wealth to feed themselves. That is different. And the distinction and the nuance is important. But, people are out there protesting and they're exercising their First Amendment rights. And he was, on the grill. He loved to cook and he's cooking up food for people. And that's beautiful, beautiful. Loved it. And work closely with him and hope to work with him in the future when they finally figure out the scam being run. And I think they're starting to figure it out. So I'm excited. I'm elated at the prospect that people who have been brainwashed are going to wake up all at once and we're going to actually have a similar cohort of people out there in the street with an entirely different focus, a real focus. And so again, we're having these events and somebody singing the national anthem comes up. Okay. Now, Jackie, who had sung at a number of other protests and led us in song, and song can be so powerful, especially when you have great singers. It can be such a powerful tool to evoke emotion and it's a powerful thing. We suggested that she sing the national anthem. I suggested that she sing the national anthem personally. And we were called and asked her sexual status. We were asked, was she gay or straight? And it blew my mind. It blew my mind. I was not cordial. I was not polite in my response. And I'm trying to work on using less profanity, but I just can't fucking help it sometimes. Because it blew my mind that all these people had sort of coordinated this theater of activism that was supposed to be about George Floyd dying. And yet, only a week or two out, we were already trying to jostle for position to prioritize the LGBTQ and sexual status. And this is a step-by-step what took place. There's not a bit of sensationalization in what I'm telling you right now. We wanted Jackie to ask anybody, find the people who are in the pictures from the George Floyd protests I led. Find any of them and ask them about this story. Find them independently. Go up online and search for some of these people. Go find them on social media and ask them about this story. If they won't tell you, they might be scared and they don't want any controversy, or they may have not known about it, or they may have been in on it. But you'll find some people who will tell you the truth. They wanted to know, was she gay or straight in order for her to sing the national anthem? And what they told me, what they told us on the phone call was that there are other people who are more marginalized who should have that opportunity. This is a young black woman. I mean, at the time, she must have been 22 years old, young black woman. young, talented, beautiful, smart black woman doing everything she can to support and in whatever way she can with her talents. And she's just coming to sing and sure, some of it gives her some exposure as well as an artist, but nothing that's really, you know, monetizable. She's doing it for her own sense of civil participation. That's not good enough, though. See, and my point in bringing this up is the black woman has always been the linchpin of this Democrat platform, all the way back to the days of slavery and Willie Lynch. Oh, and the Willie Lynch address isn't real. It hasn't been authenticated. It's been proven to be conspiracy theory. Well, true or not, the mechanism is very visible. And the mechanism was that the slave trainer, let's call him, that a slaver from South Africa was brought over. Willie Lynch was a slaver from South Africa. He was brought over by early slave owners to teach the slave owners the most efficient way to control slaves physically and psychologically. And in this address, the Willie Lynch address, he made the case that the most effective way is to break the image of the black man in the eyes of the black woman. This is the most effective way to control slaves physically and psychologically. And the way they would do it, very, very graphically described in the Willie Lynch address, is that they would take the biggest, strongest Negro and they would tie him to a tree and beat him within an inch of his life. And then they would tie him to two horses and have the two horses run in two separate directions until they literally pull his body apart. And they would make all the other slaves watch, but their real intent was to make that woman watch. And in her watching, her image of the black man would forever be broken. Broken in that she would always fear that her son would meet the same fate if he fought the status quo. And I don't need authentication from the Willie Lynch History Center to tell me that's the dynamic at play in black communities, because I lived there. And all of you black women can get as mad as you want to, but I lived it. I know it. I've seen it. I've watched it. And it's not to throw everything on black women, but at the highest levels of political and psychological manipulation, that is exactly what's taken place in the black community to this very day. Black men are cast out of the home either through the family court system, which incentivizes having men leave the home, okay, or the basic welfare system that also incentivizes having men leave the home, or drugs, crime, and the same tyrannical, kangaroo court and selective prosecution that we see Donald Trump facing today. 100%. And many black women, whether they know it or not, knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or subconsciously, many black women still fear that their young black sons will meet doom by standing up to the establishment, whatever establishment. Now, they want to try and depict it as a white or black thing, and that's just to confuse and distract you. But there are many black women who really believe it to be a black and white thing. There are many black people who believe it to be a black and white thing, although if you ask them and you poke and you prod and you dig deep enough, they'll tell you that it's a money thing. But it's easy to tie yourself to the racial thing because, right out there in front, everybody can associate it with it. That's the power of controlling the narrative. It gives people an anchor point, and that anchor point ends up being manufactured, and it's the thing that people sort of, orbit. That becomes what people orbit around. Race, 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 race. It's constantly about race. But it's much bigger than race. It's an establishment. And the establishment is comprised of a bunch of different people. And in this case, there were black members of the local LGBTQ community calling me, telling me that this young black woman shouldn't be up there singing because they didn't believe she was gay. They didn't believe she was a lesbian. or they didn't believe that she was whatever unique combination of non-binary descriptors and pronouns and sexual orientation and sexual identity that she wanted to be. Because my response to them right away was, why would you want me to ask her that? If you're actually an advocate of the LGBTQ and LGBTQ citizens, why would you want me to go and ask a young girl who wants to sing the national anthem about her sexual identity or her sexual preferences? Why would you want me to ask her that? Isn't that discriminatory? Isn't that why they don't allow? I mean, if the shoes were reversed and a young person was coming into work here at Free People Radio and I asked them about their gender identity or their sexual preferences, that would be grounds to sue me for hiring discrimination. I mean, isn't that the whole, wasn't that the norm, the standard? I mean, and again, I pointed out to show you the illogic of this movement. And it's not just that movement, it's the ethos of the entire American political culture right now. It's just accepted. Like, in what world is it acceptable for me as a first of all, as just a volunteer community leader to start going and with a clipboard and a piece of paper and pen and start asking people questions about their sexual identity and sexual preferences? Especially when it comes to singing the national anthem. What does that have to do with anything? What does it even have to do with George Floyd? Nothing. It had nothing to do with George Floyd. It had to do with a completely different political agenda. And you know what I said right away? Fuck you. Fuck you people. How dare you? It's an insult. You're insulting her, number one, but you're insulting my intelligence by being on the phone thinking you can pull that shit on me. And that is where the local Democrat liberal activist community was tipped off that I was going to be a problem. That's where it really began. That day, that very day. See, even going to the Fed, people were kind of like, I don't really know what he's talking about yet with the Federal Reserve, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it. We remember Occupy Wall Street, Yeah, big money is a problem. Anytime we want to broadly criticize money, we can do it as long as we don't really identify any real institutions we would need to condemn or protest or boycott in order to change that status quo. As long as it's still this abstract kind of conversation about money, hey, we're all in on it. So the Fed didn't even really bother people. Now your operatives, your Democrat operatives, your activists, your local liberal, sort of BLM, feminists, LGBTQ activists, the operatives, they know exactly what the Fed implication was. And they were already starting to scheme then. And that is probably how the question eventually came about this young woman singing. Let's find out where he's at on the LGBTQ inclusive marginalized narrative. Let's find out where he is on that. And as soon as I pushed back, what'd they call me? Hotep. I didn't even know what the word meant. I remember the first time they called me a Hotep here in the local activist, community. I had no clue what they were talking about. Somebody had to tell me what the Hotep meant. Shout out to Hotep Jesus. I didn't even know what it meant. I was like, what? I'm a what? You say? I'm a what? And it was other black people though. It wasn't white liberals saying it. They might have been saying it too. I didn't really come across that, but this was other black people in the community. Oh, you're just a Hotep. What you say? I'll smack you. Some things we just kind of, we're a different bunch. We've got different culture. Certain things, you're saying a bunch of words I don't know, so I'm going to take them as disrespect. Watch your mouth. Okay. That's a funny line from Kevin Hart in the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin. But anyway, yeah, they wanted to know her sexual identity and preferences. I said, that's completely inappropriate. It's completely and utterly inappropriate for you to even ask me to ask her. I don't know if she's gay or straight. I don't care if she's gay or straight. You shouldn't want me to care if she's gay or straight in order for her to sing the national anthem. There's nothing remotely appropriate about that line of inquiry. Not even remotely appropriate. And we had a huge fight about it to the point where I from then on, I don't want to talk to any of your organizations because now right then I saw it. It was clear as day. It was clear as day. I don't know if anybody else around me at the time had that same epiphany, but it was clear to me, clear as day. And I had to give people the benefit of the doubt as well. And it's going to be the same thing as for Republicans trying to go into the inner cities all across the country to get minority and black votes. You have to go in on good faith. You have to go in with the open-mindedness that there are people who are going to start to see the truth and they need a place to go. If you go in with the mentality that all you people are dumb for having been voting Democrat this whole time, then, I mean, we're not going anywhere. Part of ministering and evangelizing is to convert people. We convert people through miracles, we convert people through testimony, but we can also convert people just by bearing witness to the truth sometimes. And that's what I was able to do. And we've converted a lot of people. And there's been a lot of movement in this country. And there's been a lot of movement in this country about the Federal Reserve. And it's not all due to me, but there are a lot of people who saw me emphasize the Federal Reserve. And that will always be a piece of the history. And that's important. History is important. But under no circumstances are we going to let you start to quota out the straight black girls. She can't sing the national anthem because she's straight. Doesn't matter that she's a black woman even anymore. That's secondary. Now we got to ask who she's having sex with and how she identifies. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. And this is the type of energy you need in the United States Senate. You know, because there's all these kind of little backdoor deals and conversations that happen that never really make it to the public. So the public only has pieces of a puzzle about what the real political culture is and is dominated by, thought-wise. Get the fuck out of here. Don't be asking me who she's having sex with or how she identifies. 1, I don't know. 2, I don't need to know. 3, it's inappropriate. But it got me to thinking. So then I see the strangeness of one thing, and it leads you to question another thing, which is just a good, healthy process of epistemology. It's like the way to acquire knowledge is questions. One thing didn't seem right, and I said, "Oh, wait a second. What is going on here?" So I started to take a look at the LGBTQ activists more closely. You hear about pride parades. You grow up, if you grow up here in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, you run into gay people all the time, or people in LGBTQ all the time. I play basketball. Many female basketball players are lesbians, as obvious from the WNBA's demographic, which openly and admittedly is made up of an overwhelming majority of women who identify as lesbian or bisexual or whatever the case may be. It's a masculine sport. I get it. It's not for me to judge. I don't care. But it just is a fact that a lot of the women in the WNBA are either lesbian or they're in full support of the LGBTQ because some of their teammates may be lesbian, which in effect ends up being one big, LGBTQ virtue signal, which is what it really becomes. So I grew up here in the Twin Cities playing basketball. There were plenty of girl basketball players that were lesbians. Okay, fine. So I'm no stranger to the LGBTQ, but there is something strange that happened to the movement of the LGBTQ. And that needs to be distinguished. There needs to be a distinct line drawn between the original gay rights sort of movement. Hey, we just don't want to be bullied. We don't want to be attacked because we're gay. That's sensible. That's completely sensible. Anybody who says otherwise is tripping, okay? They're tripping. You're on a whole different type of, you're tripping. We don't have to condone it morally. We don't have to concede some strange kabuki theater where we have to say it's not a sin. It's a sin. Morally, we don't have to agree with the lifestyle or the choice. That doesn't give you the right to go out with a pitchfork and start executing people who you say are gay. One, because what makes you think that you're getting it right? But two, because that's not American. Okay, so nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying gay people should be executed or killed. Obviously, it's ridiculous. Something has happened to the movement. The movement has become warped into something way, way different. Now, your hardliners are going to argue that corrosive nature, that deterioration, that fall into where it is today is just part and parcel of where it began from a spiritual standpoint. And there's very good theological merit to make that argument. I would actually tend to agree with it. Still not for the American government or me as a citizen to go door to door and start rounding up gays. That ain't American, okay? But the line of reasoning does track. However, something unique has happened in here, in this chapter of the movement. Something strange is going on here. And all I can say is that the LGBTQ, which also really is overrepresented in the Antifa, the Antifa line of country. These were the emo and goth kids back in high school, in grade school. And look, I was an anti-bully. I didn't like to see kids get bullied. I didn't care who you were. I didn't care if you were emo or goth, if you were a little, overweight, if you were short, if you were poor and your clothes were. I didn't like when kids teased other kids for things that as a young person I perceived were out of their control. Greatly out of their control. For the most part, out of their control. When you're a kid, you realize, look, man, he can't control. He's got big ears, or that his mom, can't afford nice shoes, or he's a little bit overweight, or whatever the case. Maybe they got some emotional issues. The emo crowd and the goth kids and whatever. Everybody, just be decent to people. Okay. So I was never one to condemn and bully some of these kids. However, there was never a single moment in my time at school where we allowed the emo kids and the goth kids to be overly represented in leading the culture or discourse amongst or in the school, amongst the students in the school. Never. That's a step too fucking far. People have problems. Everybody's different. Everybody's different. Some kids are popular. Some kids are not. Some kids are somewhere in between. Some kids are great at school, very smart. Or let's say they're great at taking tests. And there is a problem with a sort of radical over-credentialization of academia in our society. Part of the reason why you have your permanent political class of globalist elites. Really good at taking tests. Really good at following orders. So there are all kinds of different people at school. All kinds of different people. But we never let the goth and the emo kids run the school. We never let the goth and the emo kids run the lunch table. In fact, they didn't even come sit at the lunch table. And I'm be quite honest, I'm not sure we would have let them. And so there is an argument there that, it's kind of, they were kind of kept out of certain things, but I'm not so sure that they would let me come sit at the emo and goth table. And so people do separate themselves into groups, and part of that's okay. And part of this idea of inclusivity and tolerance and multiculturalism is that if we just force everybody to come together without any overarching ideas, then we're going to have peace. No, we're not. That is a lie. That is the lie of the scientific method. It is the lie of democracy, and it is the lie of computer technology and now artificial intelligence. That we're going to manufacture peace without the principle and the values, overarching structure holding us together. That you could just do away with the American identity, and if you just throw everybody together and tell them peace is the goal, then you'll have peace. No, you won't. No, you won't. That is an absolute lie, and they know it's a lie. If they don't believe it's a lie, they're too incompetent to be your leaders. If they actually believe that, they are too incompetent to be your leaders. The other alternative is even worse. It's nefarious. They know it's not true, and they're doing it intentionally. And a good part of my intuition says that they know it's not true. They know it's not true. Multiculturalism only works when you're two things. The multiculturalism isn't just between two people from different cultures. It's two people with different cultures that are connected by one idea. You're American and you're Black. You're American and you're Asian. You're American and you're French. You're American and you're Mexican. But you are one thing. That one thing holds us together. And this entire identity politics, when I was on David Pakman the other day, and I said I'm not a fan of the weaponization of identity politics, I didn't say that identity isn't involved in politics. That would be retarded. Of course, people's identity is involved in politics. In fact, what's more dangerous than identity politics is the absence of identity. Because if there's a complete absence of identity, then your government, as the highest authority, will prescribe you an identity, and that's real dangerous. Oh, that's even worse than you having a warped sense of your own identity, to have a tyrant tell you your identity. So I'm not against identity being in politics, but I am against the radical weaponization of identity in politics in America today. And when I said that on Pakman the other day, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The feminine identity, the female identity has transcended American identity on the totem pole of priority. As too is the same with being Black, as too is the same with being LGBTQ. And there's nothing remotely appropriate about that. I don't care what you say about how this nation began. A nation, any nation, is a work in progress. And I don't say progress as some dog whistle to progressives. I think it's abhorrent the way the word progressive has been weaponized. But I will say that any nation is a work in progress because people are a work in progress. So a nation evolving is inevitable. However, how that nation evolves is somewhat within our control. And so to think that the American identity is sort of out of our hands in terms of creating a nation that we can be proud of and that we can all participate in some type of productive manner, to think that that's out of our hands is just nihilism. That's what it is. It's nihilism. These people are nihilists. And I don't think the early gay movement was a nihilistic movement. Although I don't agree with the lifestyle, and I do have my spiritual beliefs about it, I don't think they were nihilists. I think they had a profound enthusiasm to participate in the society. But somewhere in there, that movement was hijacked by this new sort of I don't even know, it's this sort of empathomania, this sort of self-doubt and self-loathing and self-hatred that's now been projected onto the entire human civilization. Or maybe it's been brewing since the garden. I'm not sure. That's above my pay grade, but I know what I see. I see that the modern political movement on the left is very anti-human. They are very self-hating, self-loathing. And those were and look, I'm going to be frank here. I'm going to say it like it is. There are a lot of different groups of people with a lot of different problems when we were growing up in school. But the group of people that had a distinct problem with a sort of, despair that manifested into self-harm, cutting. And, there was when I was growing up, there was a huge cutting problem with young people in schools. Huge cutting problem. And it tended to be the emo and goth kids. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm not saying there weren't other people who were doing it, but it did seem to be overrepresented in that demographic of kids, for sure. 1,000%. Maybe it was just my school. You tell me in the comments. Maybe I'm way off. But the goth and emo kids seem to have that sort of proclivity to at a very early age be wrestling with the with their sort of existential identity and whether or not they wanted to be alive, whether or not they deserved to be alive, or just very sort of advanced, mature adult uh, existential considerations at such a young age. And part of it is when you have a young creative mind that's not anchored by anything like faith or principle, it has the proclivity to sort of venture off into curiosity. And curiosity can be a gateway to despair. And despair, once consumed by it, can get dark really quick. That's why knowledge must be paired with wisdom. But my point is, we never let the goth kids run the school. We had problems. I had problems. My mom was a single mom. I wish my dad had been there. We didn't have the most money. I kept a clean pair of clothes on, but I wish I could have had another pair of tennis shoes, or, I wish I maybe ate more square meals a day. Single mom working, she drops you off at school, you go to after school program, daycare. The hot lunch is terrible at the school still to this day. Maybe it's better now than it was when I was in school, but I thought it was just awful what we feed our kids in this country. At least it was to me. Chicken nuggets and fish sticks and just a bunch of processed bullshit. All of these vegan, maybe they got vegan options and all this, organic grass-fed stuff now, but I doubt it. Anyway, I digress. But I would, could have had it better as a kid. There were a bunch of kids who had it way worse than I did. Way worse than I did. We had problems. We never let the emo and goth kids run the school. We never let them dominate the culture. We never let them tell us what to think. In what world? In what world are the emo and the goth kids telling me what to think, how to live, what I should believe, who I should follow? Shut the fuck up. I'm not following you. Just on principle, I'm not following you. You're having problems with self-hatred and self-doubt. I don't hate myself. Not only do I not hate myself, I don't hate life. I'm not nihilistic about life. I have a lot of criticisms of the way our society is structured, the way our government runs. I have a lot of criticisms of the general way that human civilization has organized itself, and some of the ideas that dominate our culture on a worldwide basis. Yeah, I have criticisms. I have my beliefs and my thoughts. And yeah, it's getting pretty dark, but part of the darkness is because somehow we let you people take the reins. And you were self-hating from the beginning. I'm just keeping it real. This is the part people don't want to, you want to dance around it. You don't really want to have to confront that. I was there. We never let the goth kids and the emo kids run the school, run the lunchroom. And again, it goes back to the conversation about organizing yourself into groups and the hierarchies. And yes, kids always organize themselves into groups, and then those groups organize themselves into hierarchies. And you're very narcissistic if you assume that the way people naturally organize themselves in the hierarchy is not uh, is not undergirded by everybody's collective consciousness, trusting that the popular kids, let's say, for lack of a better term, or the kids who are more dominant, actually have some sense of wisdom about the way things should be. And don't get me wrong, you have tyrants. And I remember there were some popular kids in school that were god awful. I mean, they were nasty and mean and vindictive and the same can be said about kings and monarchs. I'm not saying that the hierarchy is always going to give you the best leader. But I am saying that your leaders are a reflection of the collective consciousness. And so if there's going to be a criticism of a leader at some point in time, which our founding fathers were brilliant to point out, you get the government you deserve. But not all of it is corrupt. A lot of it is corrupt. But when I was coming up in high school, the number one thing that sort of organized young people was, one, physical size and stature, a sort of assertiveness, right? A sort of assertiveness, which comes from kind of confidence. Or maybe it could be an insecurity that you're projecting as confidence, but it's more confident than the next person who's not insecure enough, let's say, to resort to projecting confidence the way you are. Sometimes that person ends up being a leader. Like, I think Adolf Hitler was a very insecure person. But his insecurity yielded a confidence that outdid someone else's. So there's all those dynamics in there. But the point I'm going back to is, and if I'm being honest, the Adolf Hitlers of the world would seem more like the emo and goth kids. If I'm being honest. And who are your liberals today? I mean, let's just talk about it. It's always funny. We get called fascist and, all these words are thrown around and it's just, people have no historical context. Because anybody who knows anything about Nazi Germany and fascism knows that the liberals most resemble the Nazi evolution there in Germany. I mean, to a T, especially, as a demographic, a trajectory of demographic. They were the liberals who unionized and became the bourgeoisie. And then they used a police state to secure their power. And then they went after all of their dissidents. Who does that sound like? Be clear. I want to be very clear here. Liberals in this country are the modern day Nazis. They were the working class that became the bourgeoisie, and then they unionized, and then they created a police state to sort of solidify their power base politically, and then they went after the dissidents. Nazis. Okay, you could say they were socialists if you want to. I mean, at a level, tyranny is tyranny. Tyranny begets tyranny. You can call it, you can dress it up however you want to. My point again is we never let the goth and emo kids run the school. And we're not going to let you run it now. And I can see in the comments all of what's scary about it is when one group sort of stands up and shows you a strength in numbers, there's a natural human proclivity that goes, I got to get towards the group that there's strength in the pack. And there is strength in the pack. I mean, we see that in the animal kingdom, right? I mean, that's why the wildebeest run as a herd, because, lessens the chance across the bunch of them that they'll be successfully hunted. But what distinguishes us human beings from the animals is our sense of right and wrong. Our sense of right and wrong, our sense of moral right and wrong that transcends, our survival instinct. And this is what makes Jesus Christ's story so profound, is the impulse, the decision to sacrifice oneself on principle for a greater moral understanding is what separates the humans from the animals. And there is no greater sacrifice. And ipso facto, there's a reason why the same sort of emo goth echelon of global politics is so rejectionary of Jesus Christ. It's not secular humanism. It's secular anti-humanism. They don't want that self-sacrifice, the ability to have cognitive consciousness and moral understanding that transcends that transcends the survival mechanism. They don't want that separation between us and the animals. The question is why? Some people would say, oh, well, it's because, we care about the animals. No, I don't think so. I think the Nazis want to try and demystify your sense of uniqueness as a human entity so they can tell you that you're meaningless so they can kill your neighbors when they get ready to and you be none the wiser or not really care. I think that's the goal. The goal is to demystify your divinity, that you have a touch of divinity in you. That's why you can separate moral right and wrong. We never let the emo kids run the school. We never let the goth kids run the school. All you black people out there following these goth and emo kids, you people are goofy. I see a lot, and it's starting with a lot of you rappers. I see a lot of you rappers with this weird, dark sort of satanic, symbolism in your artwork and in your concerts. And it's just, are y'all kidding me? Are you kidding me? You guys got the audacity to call somebody a coon or Uncle Tom or stepping and fetching or trying to I don't know, for the white man. And you people are adopting Satanism, which has always been a sort of sect of society that's been dominated by white people. I mean, right back to its inception. There was no Satanism in Western Asia. There were people who opposed Christ. There was the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire wasn't satanic yet. Now, some people are going to go, but historically speaking, even if you go back deep in the Roman Empire and early Greek pagan philosophy, you find, traits of or a touch influence of what we would think of as evil and Satan. Okay, I get it, but let's just talk historically speaking. In the days of Christ, the Roman Empire, there was no Satanism yet. There was no Luciferianism yet. That wasn't a reality yet. Luciferianism, Satanism, is an offshoot that stemmed out of post-Enlightenment Europe. After the Bible was constituted into its final form that it sits in now, after the revisions and changes and things that took place, we all know of that history. But once the Bible was settled, the Satanism and Luciferianism came out of post-Enlightenment Europe. And you people are adopting Satanism and Luciferianism and acting like you're rebellious, acting like you're I don't know, woke. That Satan now is being woke. Following the goth kids is what you're doing. You're following the goth and the emo kids. I'm not doing it. We're not doing it. Sorry, and we're not really we're not fazed by your by your insults. I mean, you're stupid. You're following a group in a worldview that is completely that is inundated with self-hatred and self-loathing. They can dress it up how they want to. But the reality is that the mental health outcomes of the LGBTQ community, which often is crossover with the Antifa community, which often is crossover with the Church of Satan, the Satanic Temple, and Luciferianism. There's a lot of crossover in that demographic. They have the worst outcomes when we're talking about mental illness. That's the truth. It's not me saying it. Those are their statistics. We're not following you. Done. I wrote "Free Trump" on the side of my head, and I was at the game this past weekend, and there were, people few hecklers, most supporters, people that came up and winked and gave me the nod and shook my hand and, gave me that smile that let me know either they appreciate the courage to do it, or they support Donald Trump. They may just not be ready to say it in public, which is fine by me. All you got to do is go and vote in November. I don't need you to be a public supporter of Donald Trump. I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less if you're a public supporter of Donald Trump or not. You want to be a closeted America firster? We'll take you. We'll take you. I think the LGBTQ is trying to force people to come out of a closet that may not even exist. We don't care if you're America first in the closet, as long as you're America first in the voting booth. So there were a lot of people that gave me the wink and the nod, and there were a few hecklers. I mean, we're in Oakland, California. It's San Francisco. It's Northern California. This is Nancy Pelosi territory. Trump is going to jail. Trump's a criminal. You know, you're a terrible person. Blah, blah. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. I had to tell one guy was standing right behind the courtside seats, and he was saying something. He was mumbling, because that's what those types of people do. They mumble. When we were in school, they didn't stand up straight when they spoke. They didn't talk with any assertiveness. They mumbled. They gossiped. They, for the most part, were just quiet. So you know, and that's fine. If you're quiet, more shy, more reserved, more, what do they call it, introverted person, fine. I don't have a problem with people who are introverted. Just don't think the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, the Barack Obamas of the world, the Hillary Clintons of the world, the WEF Klaus Schwabs of the world, the Yuval Noah Harari's of the world, all of a sudden are gonna superpower you with this confidence to be able to stand up and shout some crazy shit out your mouth at me. Ain't happening. Shut up. And that's what, told the guy on the sideline. We're done with the Democrats. We're done with the LGBTQ agenda. We're done sending our money to the Ukraine. We're done with it. And also, shut up or do something. Well, you think anybody did anything? Of course they did. Of course they didn't, because I don't even think they really believe in what they're saying. I think it's all a projection of a lack of meaning and identity, which is one of the pervasive and more corrosive sort of nefarious psychological games being played with this type of politics. Because when you really get down to the root of it, it's like, what are you so emotional about? What do you really believe? You believe we should send our money to the Ukraine to instigate a nuclear war and kill a bunch of people? You believe that undocumented immigrants should just be able to come into our country and live in our country without any type of record-keeping system or anything? You believe that if we drill, if we unleash American energy here in America, it's a net negative to the environment and the planet. But if we do it over in China, it's not? Or it's acceptable? You believe that? No, you don't. You don't believe that. They've taken the emo crew, they've taken the goth kids, and they've expanded it now to include more people. And all they've done is they've played on their emotional instability. That's all they've done. It's predatory. It's predatory. What they've done to the LGBTQ is predatory. They're taking a group of people who already struggle with severe emotional and psychological instability, and they've tied that emotional and psychological instability to the hitches of their political platform and turned it into a vehicle. That's all they've done. All I see is King Xerxes, in the movie 300 with the human carriers of his big gold, gaudy, God King platform. And that's what they're doing to him. Got a bunch of LGBTQ citizens that have a 3-ton solid gold throne on their back with people like Nancy Pelosi sitting on it. She doesn't care. She doesn't care at all. And as bad as I feel for the people who have been brainwashed and manipulated like that, I'm not going to let you abuse me. Because why? If you don't have if you don't have the fortitude, the courage, the presence of mind and clarity, discernment to defend yourself against the predation of a global establishment and elite like that, I feel bad for that. I honestly do. I have sympathy for that. But I'm not gonna let you project it on me. Shut up. Shut up. We're done with the Democrats, and there ain't a damn thing y'all can do about it. And that's why they hate me. Because in one sense, I can have the most fruitful and deeply meaningful intellectual discourse you can find. I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I just watch a lot of content. I see what's out there. I see what people are talking about. I see where they're willing to go with it. And I can have one of the most deepest intellectual conversations, possible. But at the end, as soon as you cross that line, I'm still going to tell you to shut your mouth and watch your actions. Watch what you're doing. Because I am willing to fight. I am actually willing to fight. I'm willing to have the most esoteric, abstract, intellectually curious conversation about world politics and existential reality and all of it. That's great. That's healthy. And we can keep it there as long as people want. Fine. Those things should be explored. As soon as you cross that line, I am willing to fight. I will fight and I will win. Not only will I fight, I'll win. I guarantee you that. So that's my story. That was my story for the day. And I tie it all the way back to the beginning. It was so necessary for me to be out there during the George Floyd protest. It was necessary. I needed to see, I needed to hear. I needed to hear, I needed to understand this dynamic. I needed to be there when they told a young black woman that they didn't want her to sing because they weren't sure whether she was gay or straight. I needed that information. I needed it so I could have the conviction to fight and stand on the morals and principles I know to be true and right today and going forward. I needed to see the Antifa activists pop their head up with their little group of people to make you think they're a Democratic majority, the heresy of democracy, that all majorities are righteous. All majorities aren't righteous. That's not true. All majorities are not righteous. Even on face value, it's a ridiculous notion. And when they say they're trying to protect democracy, Joe Frazier, my primary opponent, and Amy Klobuchar are the exact same in this sense, that the warmongering and war racketeering that the neocons and the neoliberals do is in the interest to serve democracy, to spread democracy and to protect democracy. Democracy is just a dog whistle for globalism. That's what they're saying. We're going to be all around the world telling people the way they should live. And they're doing it right here. Well, it's not going to work. It didn't work at my lunch table when I was in school. It didn't work at the school in general. It's not going to work now in politics. We are unfazed by your impudent insults. Unfazed. I mean, completely and utterly unfazed. Every time I see one. And that's why I just respond the way I do. Up, cuck. Shut up. You're a cuck. Oh, that's not statesmanlike. And then their immediate response is, I mean, they'll say something weirdly, oddly profane, like, I had one person say something hypersexual, as a response to a very basic tweet like, hey, we shouldn't be having transgender strip shows in front of kids. And their response was hypersexual and personal. It's kind of strange. And, they can say whatever they want. And when you respond with something very casual and really just kind of flippant, dismissive, like, oh, shut up, cuck. They're like, look at him. Look at him. He's not acting like a senator. That's the problem. That's been the problem with this country, with many countries, but this country. Let's focus on America first. The problem with this country is too many senators act like senators. And what does it mean to act like a senator when the entire culture is decayed? I can't end it any better than that. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. Again, thank you to Carrie Lake for her endorsement. Good luck to her in her Senate race. Thank you to the War Room Posse, Maureen Bannon, Grace Chong, and the great Steve Bannon. Thank you to all the other supporters out there. Thank you to everybody in the audience. We appreciate your viewership today and in the future. Be sure we're going to do a Hebrews on Friday, so tune in. We got the great Professor Penn. Haven't had a Hebrews episode since I was endorsed, so that should be a fun one airing this Friday. And then Saturday morning on Real America's Voice, before Steve Bannon in the War Room, the Royce White Show. Also visit the John Fredericks Radio Network to catch me every evening at 9 p.m. Eastern on the radio. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. And we're not going to take a single back step. So you liberals, you globalists, you Marxists, you communists, you neocons, you rhinos, however you want to identify, whatever you want to call yourselves, however you want to organize yourselves, just understand this. When I was in school, I had my own lunch table. That's it. When I was in school, I had my own lunch table. There's not a chance in hell I'd ever take a single fucking back step, especially with the people who you've put up. Especially with the people who you've put up to try and discourage me. There's no discouragement because I don't take them serious. I don't take Michelle Goldberg serious because she writes for the New York Times. I don't take what was the kid's name from the Daily Beast? I don't even remember his name really. Roger Sullenberg. I don't take him serious. I don't take David Pakman serious. I don't take Roland Martin serious. I don't take these people serious. I don't even take Amy Klobuchar serious. I know she's got a serious position and she's got a serious war chest. She's got some serious connections, but I don't take her serious. The cold open is proof of her lack of seriousness. Anybody who would say that Joe Biden is mentally sharp is lying to you, obviously. So I don't take these people serious. So again, if you're going to try and discourage me or shame me into submission, you're going to have to find some better people. But I tell you this, it doesn't matter who you find. And that's what you all are really scared of out there. I get it. You have a very acute ability, a very attuned, finely tuned ability to identify the people who are unfazed by broad criticism. I'm very unfazed by criticism. Very unfazed. Part of it just comes from having that confidence. And this is what you want your leaders to have. You don't want leaders that bend to mob rule and social pressure. One, because you'll never get any novel ideas. You'll probably never solve any problems because in order to solve problems, you usually need novel ideas from individuals who are very unique in their intellect, in their circumstance, the way they were brought up, their perspective on life. Novel ideas usually come from unique individuals. Beethoven, Bach, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther. Novel ideas usually come from unique individuals. And that is and that's really the problem in this country and all around the world is too many senators act like senators. I reject that on face value. I reject the whole notion. I don't want my senator to act like a senator. I want my senator to act like somebody who wants to represent the common interests of the American people. And when I say common interest, I don't mean the decadent common interest. I mean the common interest that gives prosperity and well-being. And sometimes that may be against the wishes of the American people. And that is exactly the moment where real leaders stand up. The fight continues. Don't die a jerk off. As always, Godspeed.